You're watching Ask the Expert. I'm Greg Kirkham, and today I'm here with Paul McGraw, the president of Real
Hey,
Estate Marketing Inc., based in good old Kansas, Missouri. Paul, welcome to the show, my friend.
hey, how are you?
Doing fantastic. I'm excited to get to know you a bit more here. First, how did you get started in real estate investment training?
Well, I started as an investor in my early 20s. I was about 21 years old, and I started buying houses. The I don't know if you remember the original course by Carlton Sheets. I think it was called No Money Down. I long since have lost it, but he ended up being my mentor. But that's another story. But I started out just buying houses and doing it wrong, and going bankrupt. I couldn't figure things out, and so I said, I got to figure how am I going to do this. And so I started going through Robert Kiyosaki's stuff, and he's got some really good financial philosophy books and stuff like that. But one of the big things he said was, you need to get a mentor. You need to get somebody who's been there. If you really want to grow and you want to grow fast, you got to get somebody who's there. You can't just read about it, right? So I tried to hunt mentors. I don't know if you know Ivory Homes out there in Utah. You've seen them?
Yeah. Ivory Homes is still really big out here.
One of their big wigs, I actually climbed his fence to knock on his door to try to talk to him, and he threatened to call the police. But it's really hard to get a mentor and get a good mentor. But I eventually nagged Carlton because he actually was in West Valley, which is there in Utah. And that's where his headquarters were at the time. And I kind of snuck past his secretary and got into his office and talked to him and said, hey, what would it take for you to mentor me? And he said, well, you pay me $50,000 and I'm taking all your profit for the first year. And he says, that's the only way I'd do it. And I said, done. Right. And so, but I didn't have the money for it. So I had to put it on cards and, sell my car and all that other stuff to get in there. But I don't think he thought I was going to take it because it shocked him when I showed up and said, okay, let's do it. And he stuck to his word and we trained and I started working with him. I ended up working with a lot of other celebrities because of him. Most people would have said he ripped me off, but, in reality, he, made my career. I started working with a lot of your other investment companies. Several of them were headquartered in Utah, but I got a little disillusioned because as they would get bigger, they would get worse. So their training would, they would expand across the country. They'd have all these seminars everywhere. And then their actual, deliverable product, which is, getting somebody to a level of success or even to have any deals done at all, was so small. It was just, kind of disheartening because they just were focused on the bottom line, not so much getting people to, actual success. As I was working with them, I'm also building my own company and it went really well. So I parted ways amicably, but I was glad I met all the celebrities I have. And, it does help you realize that they're just people. But I eventually came to, my senses and said, hey, I want to continue to do some training. And so I created a much smaller enterprise where we do one-on-one coaching because that actually works. And we actually have mentorship and I mentor my clients and I'm trying to set up a network of people. But overall, I've trained over 1,500 people to be successful in real estate across the country, Canada, Australia, even some in Europe, in the English-speaking countries, that I understand. I tried a guy in Serbia, but that place is a whole nother world. But so I've been everywhere. I've traveled all over the place and I don't travel near as much now. So I'm trying to kind of set it up and shrink it down. But the main reason, I do it is because when my grandfather had retired, he ended up having to be a janitor just to pay the bills, which I didn't think was fair because he had two retirements from, it was the Army Air Corps, it wasn't the Air Force at the time. And then another one. But it still wasn't enough to keep him going. So he was, in his 70s and I was a teenager and I was helping, my grandpa, who I thought was this great war hero, to clean toilets. And I thought, this is horrible. Why does this guy, who's awesome, who took me fishing and stuff like that, and why did it end up like this? And that's kind of why I started so young, is I had this example. I grew up very poor. My parents were very poor. My dad worked 3 jobs, just to keep us in our duplex, and it was a wild ride. But my grandfather, one time I had to do a report on World War II, and he took me through all these pictures of piles of shoes and dead bodies, and they ended up liberating one of the concentration camps. I mean, here's this guy's, like a major war hero, having to do this in his old age because he bought into a lie that the government's going to take care of you when you retire. It won't happen. So if you don't do something now, you will end up that way, especially today, because inflation is horrific. It's killing our dollar, and you're not making any money saving money. You are losing money every single day. Now, if you get into real estate, however, it inflates beyond, and especially right now, beyond inflation. And it makes you money while you hold it. You get tax deductions. And so everybody get into it is shocked at how easy it is to actually make money without doing very much. Once you got some rental
Yeah.
properties, it takes care of it. Plus, you don't need as much income because you're not paying as high of a tax bill. And
Yeah.
so I wish my grandfather had got into that, right? But he didn't. And I go to McDonald's sometimes because I got 4 kids, and I hate McDonald's, but they love McDonald's. But there's always somebody there who's should be retired, should be,
Yeah.
living someplace more comfortably, but they've got a bad hip. They're 65 years old. They're 70. They can't do anything else. No one's going to hire them. They're overqualified. Because I've
Yeah.
talked to them, you go to Walmart, you see the same thing, even Target, where people are either in their retirement years and they're having to work. And
Yeah.
that's really the purpose of what I do. I look for people who are highly motivated. And if you're not highly motivated, there's plenty of good mentors out there. You just have to hunt for them,
Yeah.
and good training programs, but that wouldn't be for me. But if you're
For
highly
sure.
motivated, that's kind of what I'm looking for, because that's the person who, I had a single mom being evicted. She's getting kicked out,
Yeah.
and she says, is there anything I can do? And I says, yep, we'll get you started. And we got her started. She jumped in with both feet. A month later, she was, had to get out of her house, but we got her into a lease option agreement with a local property. She got 3 bedrooms instead of 2. She was paying
Yeah.
about as much rent as she was paying before, and she had 2 teenage daughters. And that's the first thing we did. Second thing, we got her into we did a wholesale deal. She made $41,720 on one deal, which changed her
Wow.
life. She never made that much money in a year, right? But that's what I
Yeah.
do it for, because that lady, without me, would have been homeless, right? They're kicking
Yeah.
her out because her dog made too much noise, and she didn't want to get rid of her dog. And why somebody wants
Yeah.
to have a big, what was it? It was like it was a mix, but it was one of those big, heavy dogs, and the limitation on the lease was like a tiny toy poodle, and she's got this big dog, and she didn't want to get rid of the dog, but for whatever reason, when they changed management, the management was a stickler for that. They're like, you got to be out, and she's like, well, I can't do this, and then they raised her rent and
Yeah.
kind of squeezed her out.
So
But
you
she
were
would have
able
ended up
to
homeless.
I love the fact that you're able to help so many people, and sorry to cut you off there. I know this one is the
No
5 to
worries.
7 minute interview.
You
Um
give me a minute. I'll take the whole time.
Well, I love what you're doing. I love the freedom that you're helping people achieve, and also the insights that you're giving while training these people. You're doing an incredible job. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show today, my friend. To learn more about Paul McGraw and Real Estate Marketing Training Inc., visit asktheexperttv.com.